Okay. This moment we reconvened the meeting, and we were about to go into item E, if the clerk would read.
E is approval of the 2018 Go Topeka audit.
Good evening. Tonight I have before you the 2018 Go Topeka audit report. Late last year we engaged CBiz as our auditing firm for 2018 audit. Since then they have merged with Burbridge Trahan. So please let me introduce you to Morgan Paget from Burbridge Trahan, which will walk you through the audit report you have in front of you.
Good evening. I am Morgan Paget. I'm a director with Burbridge Trahan. As Natalie mentioned, we did have a firm name change. I used to be with Mayor Hoffman McCann, actually, and we merged with Burbridge Trahan. So that's the firm that's giving you the 2018 audit report. So you have in front of you the 2018 audited financial statements. I am just going to go through these at a very, very high level. If you have questions, please let me know. Just want to mention a couple of things before we get started. These statements are on a full accrual basis. What you see on a quarterly basis from Go Topeka is a modified cash basis, so there are some differences in the way things are accounted for. And also this year we do have, these are consolidated. 2018 is when the Go Topeka ETLC Support Corp was created, and Go Topeka is the sole member of that, and so under accounting standards we bring those two entities together and report as one organization, so you're going to see that as we go through it as well. Well, I want to start is on the first two pages, which is our independent auditors report. This just gives our report, but the first paragraph there does say that we did audit the consolidated statements. This letter also talks about what management's responsibility is for the statements and what our responsibility is as the auditors. Our opinion is actually on page 2 under the opinion paragraph, and this is a clean, unmodified opinion, and what that says is that the statements are materially correct in accordance with accounting standards. So that's clean and what we like to see there. Page 3 is the statement of financial position. It's going to show your assets and liabilities and net assets for, again, Go Topeka and the ETLC Support Corp together. Total assets for 2018 were $31 million. You can see the major ones there being cash. There's some restricted cash, which are some escrows, and then property and equipment is another big one, and then land held for economic development, which is the land they continue to hold at the two parks for future incentives if they should so choose. Total liabilities are $23.6 million. The biggest piece of that is the 13.2, which is the deferred grant revenue for JEDO. Those are the unspent amounts at the end of 2018, and that's been approved for you for carryover to future years. And then there's another big one there for the long-term debt net of loan fees of $6.1 million. That is the debt that the support corp for the East Bay Learning Center has outstanding at the end of the year. So total net assets are $7.4 million. All of those are unrestricted. There are no donor restrictions on those amounts. Next page, I'm going to show revenue and expenses. If we look at just the total column, total support and revenues of $9.6 million, the biggest piece of that being $8.8 on the JEDO grant revenue. This is a difference between cash and accrual. Under accrual, that revenue is recorded when they expend those funds, not just when they've received the $5 million every year. So they did spend $8.8 million of those funds, so that's the revenue recorded. Then we look at program expenses of $8.8 million and support G&A expenses of $2.1 million. So it gets us to a net change in assets of a negative $1.3 million, which is essentially a net loss on an accrual basis for the year. There's some additional detail of expenses on page 5. I don't really want to note anything there other than just, of course, their major expenses are personnel costs and then grants and new initiatives and the contribution line of $1.5 million, which is what Go Topeka gave to GTP Foundation or GTP Partnership when they joined that. Those were the private dollars that they gave to the partnership to join that, the 1.5. Okay, cash flow statement on page 6. Net cash flows from operating activities of $3.1 million negative. That's cash outflows net from operating activities. We then also used 1.6 for some investing activities, so we had a net decrease in cash for the year of 4.8, which makes sense when you think about they spent more than just the $5 million they got during 2018. They spent more than that, so we would expect cash to go down for that. And also then the private dollars that they gave to GTP also was a cash outflow. Okay, footnotes are on page 7. Just a couple of them I want to point out. To you. Note number 2 on the summary of accounting policies. This just gives all the accounting policies that tell you how things are accounted for. We have a couple new ones. Consolidation 1 on page 7 just does describe the fact that these are consolidated and that any intercompany transactions have been eliminated between the two organizations. The other new one I want to point out is on page 9. It's under that new accounting pronouncements paragraph. There was a new accounting pronouncement required to be implemented in 2018, and that has been done so. That applies to nonprofits, and it just describes what it is. It's mostly presentation items. Doesn't change the way things are accounted, but just does change some presentation type items. Okay, if you want to jump ahead to page 11 on note number 8, this is the restricted cash and funds. There's a couple of items on the balance sheet that were noted as being restricted, and so we have 2 of them. The $1.7 million is what's sitting still in Mars's escrow that hasn't been drawn down yet. And then there's $5 million in restricted cash, which is what's sitting in the escrow account for the construction of the East Topeka Learning Center at the end of 2018. Note 10 on long-term debt does give you the terms of the $6.5 million total debt that the support corp has taken out related to the construction of that facility. Gives you that interest only is paid on a quarterly basis for the first 7 years, and then after that there will start to be principal and interest payments under the current terms of the note. It's kind of the second paragraph down on page 12, just talk about that Go Topeka does guarantee that debt. And then there are some requirements for the ETLC Support Corp to remain certain status during the course of that course of the loan. And then it'll show you how the principal will be paid. It's all going to be after 2023, since it's principal only for the first 7 years. Related party transactions on note 11. That first paragraph there does talk about the Greater Topeka Partnership and the fact that Go Topeka did join that. And all the other entities under that partnership are deemed to be related parties. So it explains that and lists those all out, and then we've given you the information of transactions that have occurred between either Go Topeka, well, it's all Go Topeka, and those other entities in the partnership. Okay, so that Go Topeka owes some various organizations for some things, and those are all laid out there as well. There's some revenue that Go Topeka gets from the GTP, and that's $629,000, which is reimbursement of expenses paid with private dollars, since GTP holds all those private dollars now. And again, under expenses, it does talk about the 1.5 that was given to GTP, again, all being private dollars that were held at the end of 2017 that were transferred to the partnership. Okay. Note 15 is the next one I want to look at, which is on page 14, talks about incentives. For 2018, the organization did pay $348,000 for cash incentives out. And they also have several outstanding contingent incentives that are expected to be paid over that 5-year maturity. Again, these are contingent on those businesses actually having some performance or meeting some obligations. And so these are not recorded as a liability for Go Topeka because they haven't, those businesses have not earned those yet. And so, but if everybody does what they have agreed to do or plan to do, these are how those will be paid out over the next 5 years. Okay, that's the last footnote. The very last 2 pages you have in your packet just breaks down the consolidated numbers into the individual companies or the individual entities, if you would like to see those. Just wanted you to know that we did not audit to that level, so I can't tell you that Go Topeka standalone is good or vice versa, but we just audited to the consolidated level. But the information is back there if it's at all useful. So are there any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from the body with regards to the audit? Yes, Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your reports, for your audit, I guess, in this case. On 14, under item 15, on page 14, there's an entry here which I don't understand. It says less board designated employment incentive held in escrow.
Yeah, so there's, good question. There have been some amounts funded to the Mars escrow account that Mars has not earned yet, that's employment incentive driven. So they're sitting in that Mars escrow account, but you've not paid them to Mars and they haven't earned them yet. So the board has set that money aside to be used for that when Mars does earn them, and that's why they're board designated.
Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions? Yes, Commissioner Archer.
Is there going to be an umbrella report for Greater Topeka Partnership?
Yes, there will be. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we are working on that now.
Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. And back to 15 and funded and held in escrow.
Yes.
See note 8.
Yes. Note 8, what is note 8? Oh, that just explains the restricted nature of those escrow funds.
Okay. What page is that on?
11.
11.
Additional questions? Seeing no further questions, is there a motion for approval
Move
of
to
this
approve.
audit? Thank you very much, Commissioner Archer. Second? Councilman Emerson? Seeing no additional comments or questions, we proceed with the vote by roll call.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Commissioner Rippon,
Yes.
Commissioner Cook,
Yes.
Commissioner Archer,
Aye.
Councilmember Cohen,
Yes.
Councilmember Emerson,
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser.
Yes.
7 yes.
7 having voting yes, the motion passes. The audit is approved. We now move on to item F, if the clerk would read.
F is discussion with possible action, Community Broadband Task Force.
I would like to invite Gina Millsap, CEO of our library, to talk to us a little bit about this and invite our guests.
Thank you. Good evening. First, let me introduce my colleagues and teammates. Chris Campbell of Tilson Technologies, who is the consultant who's been working with us for the past year and is here from Vermont for this presentation this evening. And of course, Councilman Jensen, who has been invaluable in working on this project. Just a reminder, because we always have this gap where we have to do a little bit of catch-up. In December, we came to you with an update and sought permission to change the direction based on the results of the request for information process that we did and the interviews that we did with telecommunication providers. So based on the information that we got from them, which essentially was, in many cases, especially within the footprint of the city, providers were not looking for financial incentives or assistance. They were looking for a more streamlined approach to doing broadband work within Topeka and Shawnee County. And so that is really where, in developing a business assistance program, that is where we really put our efforts. So this was really all Chris's work. So I know he'll say this as well, but city employees and county employees both were incredibly helpful and very forthcoming about the information that was needed to develop these recommendations. And I know Mary Feeney has been in contact with Chris quite a bit, so thank you, Mary. That's much appreciated. So Chris is actually going to go through the PowerPoint presentation with you. He'll remind you, too, of the 3 overarching goals that we have for this. I wanted to speak just a little bit to the digital inclusion piece again, and I gave a pretty lengthy presentation in December about this, but I will give you an update on that. So the library has volunteered to basically lead this effort and facilitate this effort for the community. We have formed, we're in the process of forming a new team. We will, as we always do, bring in our partners, including our school districts, because of the library card campaign that we're conducting, so that every school-age child in Topeka and Shawnee County will have library cards. We're working with the schools to do a lot of other types of services, especially outreach to families. And we know that this will be very helpful to a lot of families, especially from our low and moderate income neighborhoods. Working with Topeka Housing Authority, working with Workforce Development, and a host of other nonprofit and governmental entities with whom we share that constituency, and that we know needs assistance with their digital skills. Certainly, I'm happy to respond to any questions, but if there are none for me at this point, Chris is going to present and give you an overview of the report that was in your packet. The executive summary at 1 page we get credit for just one page, has the recommendations on there, so you can certainly refer to that for the meat of this. And then Councilman Jensen is going to offer some remarks and a motion as well, because we would like to seek your assistance in moving this project forward, because what needs to happen now is action needs to be taken on these recommendations that really have to do with policy and procedure, both for the city and the county. Once those matters are dealt with, we can then proceed to the final deliverable on this project, which will be a development guide that can be placed online that any provider, both all our incumbents as well as any new providers that might be interested in broadband development in Topeka and Shawnee County, then will find a streamlined, very easily accessible process to use. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. Welcome, Chris.
Okay, it's always good when that works as expected. It's good to be back here. I'm going to walk you through our recommendations on policies and procedures of the city and the county, and some improvements that we think will help the city and the county throw the door open a little bit wider to companies that would be interested in coming here and investing their own money in improving broadband services in the community. So Gina covered a little bit of how we got here, but we started out with looking at some of the cost and the economics of deploying fiber and wireless networks, and we gave you a report on that last year. We engaged stakeholders, and those led to the development of some goals for the project. I'll just very briefly review those in a moment. And then, very importantly, as Gina mentioned, last year we engaged in a broadband service provider outreach process, and we did that two ways. We engaged in interviews with companies, both companies who were already here and then companies who were potentially interested in coming here, and also through a formal request for information, so that anybody we might have missed had an opportunity to tell us what they think, and they did. They did tell us what they think. Part of that was a good news goal, because there was actually some substantial interest in companies who were looking to do things in the city of Topeka and in Shawnee County. And so, as Gina mentioned, we pivoted a little bit based on that and to this broadband business assistance initiative. So this is a really summarized version of the goals, and an even more summarized version is there's a coverage goal, in particular, covering parts, especially rural parts of the county that don't even have access to adequate broadband today. There's a digital inclusion goal, and then there's a gigabit goal, really bringing broadband services within the city and the county to the next level. And the recommendations that we have in my presentation today are really focused on the first and the third goal. So these are recommendations that we think will encourage companies to come in and take action to address those goals. So the pieces of the what we're calling the Business Broadband Assistance Initiative and where we are in this process. So one part of it is that based upon feedback we've gotten from providers, we're pulling together data that they've indicated is useful to them in planning their networks and conducting feasibility studies to make sure that this is an investment that they need to make. And we've gotten very good cooperation. A lot of this information is GIS-based information. We've got really good cooperation from the city and the county GIS departments on that. We're already working on that. We're also working on getting some additional information available from electric utilities serving the region. They've got some key infrastructure that broadband providers often want to use. And then the focus of our presentation today here is really on a review that we conducted of city and county policies and procedures that broadband providers would need to know about, would need to interface with. And I want to reiterate what Gina said, is that we've interacted a lot with city and county staff, and really they've been very professional and helpful and public spirited in supporting this effort. And so I don't want to make sure that does not at any point get lost in this process. So what we're really driving towards is a set of recommendations that we hope that the city and the county themselves will act upon to implement some of these recommendations. And we want to feed those, as well as the policies and procedures that aren't changing, into a development guide. And that is really intended for it's a roadmap for any broadband provider who's looking to deploy infrastructure and invest in the city and the county, at things that they need to know, expectations that they need to have, and who they can reach out to help with that initiative. And then we're basically looking to publicize that and get a response, especially some of the response, including but not limited to companies who responded to the RFI last year. And really, the objective here is to see just how far that private investment can carry us towards those coverage goals and towards that gigabit goal, the increase in services. Again, with seeing how far that private investment will carry us without commitment of significant public dollars. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our recommendations, but and before I do that, I want to just give you really high-level context for the city and county requirements. Now, this isn't intended to be a comprehensive review of every last potential city and county, but really some of the major categories that we've come across in our review. So one of the categories are franchises and master license agreements. So these are basically permission that companies who are deploying infrastructure, especially infrastructure in the public right-of-way, seek as a sort of a general authorization to have access to those resources. They generally come with a compensation component that goes to the city or the county. In addition, there are permits that deal with the details. So, with the franchise agreement sort of gives you a general authorization, but then, in the county, you're going to need something like a highway use permit. In the city, you're going to need some things like excavation permits and sidewalk permits and temporary use of right-of-way permits. The city also requires all contractors and subcontractors to be licensed by the city. And then, of course, there are zoning requirements, and the most relevant ones for our analysis here were actually the zoning requirements that applied to wireless facilities. There's special categories of requirements, zoning requirements that apply to that type of facility. Okay, so at a high level, based on our review, we recommended the following categories of changes. And I'm going to go into these in a little bit more, each of them in a little bit more detail, but just briefly, our recommendations are, first, we think it'd be beneficial to establish a broadband development single point of contact. Two, we think that there are some opportunities to streamline the permit process in the city of Topeka, especially for major development projects. Three, we think that there's room to clarify what are some of the construction methods that are acceptable for underground construction. We also think that there's room to clarify exactly how, especially the city, would apply but also the county, franchise or master license requirements. And I'll unpack that a little bit in a while. Finally, one of the types of small facilities, small wireless facilities, not your traditional tall towers, are becoming increasingly important in the deployment of all kinds of wireless networks. And we think that there's some room to provide some more option for those kinds of facilities. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about each of these. One of our observations, and I should back up and say, as a general matter, the city and the county are not outliers in their requirements. I mean, they are have requirements that you often find in jurisdictions like this. What we're really focused on is, how can you become even a little bit better. Not that there's sort of a fundamental overall. You don't need a total overhaul of your requirements. So the first area though is that there are a lot of city and county personnel and offices to deal with, and we think that it would be a more straightforward process and a more welcoming process for this category of development if there was a broadband coordinator, broadband development coordinator, who would be the primary point of responsibility, who would interface and bring other departments to the table as necessary, who would be the primary point of contact with the broadband providers, project manager, and who could also be an advocate for the city's interests with sort of outside third parties like the state and the utilities who also have a significant impact on this category of development. We think that, at an initial stage, this doesn't really need to be a new resource. It could be an existing resource that, sort of does this responsibility. However, if you were to get a project coming in that was a major project that was going to be a substantial amount of construction, was going to last more than a year, at that point it might actually be worth considering having a dedicated resource, at least for the duration of the project, not necessarily as a permanent resource. So that's our first recommendation. So our second recommendation has to do with streamlining the permit process in Topeka, and we're focused here primarily on the city simply because the requirements in the county are already relatively lower. And we think that there's some opportunity here, which is normal, normal in a city versus a county. You would expect them to be lower in a rural area than an urbanized area. But we think that there's some opportunity for some process improvement here that would benefit both the developer of the infrastructure and the city. So, right now, a lot of the detailed permits that I was talking about, things like the sidewalk and the right-of-way, or the temporary use of the right-of-way and the excavation, so the norm expectation is that these are going to be fairly granular, maybe even block by block permits. And our concern about that is that on a major project, we think that wouldn't scale very well. And could create, delays and sort of burdens on both sides. We think an alternative approach would really be to provide somebody who wants to do a major development with the opportunity to come in up front and do a development agreement, right? And the development agreement would cover many of the things that you would otherwise cover, in detail in these permits, but you would sort of establish expectations up front for many of those things like, allowed construction methods, or would provide, typical engineering cross-sections for how you deal with different kinds of right-of-way situations, and so on and so forth. And then if you have this development agreement, it provides the opportunity to say, okay, when you come in with your detailed engineering plans and you say, we're ready to do this area, you can come in with a little bit of a lighter package, right, as long as it conforms with the approach that's outlined in the development agreement. You can come in for a larger area, so there's fewer permits to process, and you can have a faster turnaround. And we think that that'll actually, I think this is not really about, lowering the city's standards. This is just, thinking about how you would scale the city's processes and requirements to a larger scale project and do it in an efficient way. We also think there's some room to clarify allowed construction methods for underground construction. So currently in the county's applications for permits, it's actually pretty clear. They've got, you're asking for trenching, boring, or plowing of facilities, of fiber facilities. And we found in the city it's not quite so clear up front. We don't actually think that there's necessarily a lot of substantive disagreement between potential developers here. So we think that this is actually something where the city can get a benefit just by clarifying its position a little bit. But here's how we believe that it should be clarified. So we think it would be really helpful and a good, significant progress if it was clarified that directional boring was typically approved as an underground method of construction. Now, directional boring is essentially a method where you dig a pair of pits, several hundred feet apart, and then you take a directional drill and you drill a tunnel in between. So there is some disturbance, but you're not disturbing the space in between. It's not appropriate in every situation, and we're not suggesting that you say that it's appropriate in every situation. But I think it would be reassuring to folks coming in that, this is a common method, and it would be reassuring to know that it was, typically would be acceptable. Beyond that, we think that it would be helpful to make a subtle but important shift in the stance towards underground construction methods generally. So I think it would be very helpful to say the city and the county are committed to working with the developer to identify reasonable, cost-effective construction methods that allow them to reach every serviceable premise. This isn't saying that they can reach it by whatever construction method that they want in every case, but it would be a statement that they're sort of committed to saying, yes, we're going to consider the impact on our right-of-way and the disruption in our right-of-way, but we're also going to consider the cost of construction, and our overall goal is to say, we're going to make sure we find a solution that works for every serviceable premise in the city. I think these are subtle policy statements, but I think that they'll actually be useful in providing some reassurance that providers who want to come in and do construction will have feasible methods of doing construction in the city. Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about city and county franchise and master license requirements. And I apologize, this can get a little dense, but I'll try to make it as straightforward as possible. Essentially what we have here is we have sort of over time, there's been built up different frameworks for how providers are allowed to come in and use the rights of way and provide compensation. I think it would be helpful to unpack those a little bit and clarify how they apply. So some examples of frameworks that have been used. So the city is authorized and has provided franchises to local telephone companies, and those local telephone companies pay the city a percentage of gross revenues based upon those services. In the same way, the city and the county used to provide cable franchises, and the cable providers would provide a percentage of gross revenue based upon those services. Since 2006, the state, through the Kansas Corporation Commission, has taken over the video franchising process and now does it at the state level, but municipalities are still allowed to ask for that gross revenue compensation. In addition, more recently, there have been, the city has used master license agreements to provide authorization for companies who are deploying fiber optic facilities and wireless facilities. Now, there's a sort of an important shift there, and that is the focus now is on the type of facility, not on the service provided, right? And the compensation framework is a little different for those. For fiber networks, it's been a per foot compensation basis. For wireless facilities, it's been a per attachment compensation framework. And so I think, coming in, I think a broadband provider might not really understand, if I'm deploying something like a fiber optic facility, which can deliver telephone service, could deliver video services, can definitely deliver internet services. Am I doing franchise? Am I doing a master license? Am I doing both? What am I paying based upon that? So our recommendation is to, without sort of overturning all of these franchises and master licenses you've already entered into, we think that there's a relatively simple clarification that you can do. And that is basically saying that, well, okay, if you're an internet service provider and you're deploying facilities and you obtain either a franchise for telephone service or a state video franchise, video for services franchise, you'll pay based upon the gross revenue in those franchises, and you won't pay in addition to that. So it basically provides some clarity that they can pick a lane, right, and that they have an opportunity to essentially pay under the framework that existing video, franchisees and local telephone franchisees are paying, and there's sort of equality across those categories of companies who are offering similar services. So in addition, we took a look at regulations on wireless facilities. And I should say, our scope here was really focused on the county requirements for wireless facilities. This is really because we expect that in order to meet that coverage goal, wireless is going to be a really important part of that. But I should say that the city and the county have done some really good collaboration on some standards for wireless facilities. And so while we sort of entered through the county, our recommendations are really applied to the joint work of the city and the county, and we think they could be applied to either jurisdiction. So generally, looking at the county zoning requirements for wireless facilities, there's a specific section of the requirements, but it's really focused on traditional taller towers. And for that category of development, it's reasonable. However, because small wireless facilities are smaller, lower impact, need to be cheaper, there need to be more of them, they need to be closer to people that they're serving, generally an ordinance that's tailored for large towers doesn't often do very well in regulating small wireless facilities. Now, the city and the county have collaborated on a set of design and aesthetic guidelines for small wireless facilities, but those guidelines we don't believe have been codified with the county. So it's a little unclear how exactly they apply in the county. As a general matter, when we reviewed those guidelines, we thought that a lot of good work had been done, and a lot of it was applicable and you should keep and simply seek to codify. There were some aspects of it that we think really should be changed if you're going to, especially if you're going to codify it. And so those items really were the following. One, it's important, we think, to explicitly allow the placement of small wireless facilities on new wood poles, not just existing poles. We think that that would actually be a very useful tool in some rural areas and potentially also in some commercial and industrial areas, and would be attractive. Another feature is that the guidelines really focused on requiring cylindrical antennas on top of poles. We don't think that's appropriate for every type of wireless facility. There are especially some fixed wireless broadband facilities and also forthcoming 5G cellular facilities that are going to use panel antennas and would have a hard time adapting to a cylindrical requirement. So we would propose to relax that requirement. There's also a proposal to shroud or essentially, provide a covering for antennas around it. And again, due to the shape and other requirements, some wireless facilities really can't be effectively shrouded. So, we think if you just tile that back to, it still have to fit within a relatively modest area to be considered small, but there are circumstances where shrouding is not appropriate, we think. Also, the guidelines had some spacing requirements that limited the number of facilities that could be on a single block. We felt that could actually have the effect of creating a prohibition, especially in areas where there had been multiple carriers who already deployed and actually would be subject to challenge. And then finally, there was the guidelines did not allow attachments to decorative poles, which we think is actually reasonable, but we think actually a better alternative is allowing those decorative poles to be replaced with specially designed decorative poles of a similar design that are actually designed to house wireless facilities. So those, so overall, we think that the guidelines that the city and the county have already worked on, there's a lot of good work in there. There's a lot of stuff that you should keep. But we did feel like these were some modifications, and as part of our report, we presented a draft ordinance that incorporated our recommendations as well as the existing city and county guidelines, to the extent we weren't, suggesting that you modify them. So let's talk a little bit about our next steps. What we're hoping for next is that this will move to the city and the county to actually adopt the recommendations that we're proposing to you, and then we want to use those amended policies as well as, the existing policies and procedures that wouldn't be changing as part of a development guide. And this is really the roadmap that I was talking about. So ideally, what we'd like to do is, by the time you have your September meeting, we'd like to have that development guide done. In order to do that, we think that we would need the city and the county to act on the recommendations within 6 to 8 weeks. So that's sort of the time frame that we're looking at if we're going to be out with the development guide in about September. So these are the two actions that we're asking you to consider tonight. One, we're asking you to take the recommendations that we've presented to you, refer them to the city, to the county, the recommendation that they adopt them. And then also, once the policy and procedure changes have been, our objective with the development guide is really just to describe factually and accurately what the requirements, the expectations, the processes of the city and the county are. And so at that point, of course, we will need the city and the county's, review of that. But we think that you could probably, if you chose to, delegate the review of that output to those bodies. We're really not making recommendations about what to do. We're just trying to describe factually what is at that point. Any questions?
Before we go to any questions, I wanted to give Councilman Jensen an opportunity to make some remarks.
Thank you. So as you know, this has been quite the lengthy project when it was started quite some time ago, and we've gone through a lot of focus shifting here. Initially when the Tulsa guys presented, they sketched out a high-level design for an entire wireless network for the county at great expense. And there was some constructive feedback that was provided by this body for that. And so we took that concept, we met with our incumbent providers, and we met with some interested parties that would look to come to the community, and we've retooled our focus to sort of meet the best we can with the available resources we have at both the city and the county level, the available resources that JEDO has, and what people are asking for, what the broadband providers are asking for. So I think this is excellent work, and I look forward to championing this at the city, and I would encourage a member of the county commission to do so as well there. I wanted to invite two gentlemen from ALLO up here to give some quick ideas as to why this is important to them as providers that could be looking at our community, a team that's not here. I will also tell you that as part of this, I am intending to reach out to our incumbent providers that are already here and make sure that the changes that we're proposing will also help them grow. The whole idea is to provide more coverage to folks in the community, and we need our incumbent partners that are already here to be able to grow. We need to make it available for new people to come to the community and help us grow. So with that, if you gentlemen have any remarks, I would love to hear them.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, my name's Dave Miller. This is my associate James Dobish with ALLO Communications out of Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm the Director of Ethical Engagement because we don't see a lot of ethics in telecommunications, so that's one of the reasons I have that role. First of all, we really affirm what the city of Topeka and Shawnee County is doing. We've been doing fiber optic to the home and business for 15 years. Lincoln is the largest city that we've undertaken, but it's gone extremely well. So when we found out, we responded to the RFI. Obviously, we were very excited because it's sort of in our neighborhood, 2.5 hours away. And really affirm the recommendations here because as an ISP, you want to be able to work with a community, number one, that is serious about doing this, because that makes our job easier. We look for partnerships, and so there's an investment on our part, resource and that sort of thing, and we're also looking for that sort of serious commitment from communities. And so I'm sensing that here tonight, and we're excited about it. So James and I just drove down to kind of listen and see where you guys are with this, and hopefully we'll be able to continue conversations. So
thank you for your comments.
Thank you for coming over here.
Yeah, very much appreciated. I will share that one of the important things is getting better connectivity into the county, and part of that is making it cheaper to do business in the city so that providers have the resources to drive deeper into the county where it's not as cost effective. So part of the focus is how do we make things easier so we can push coverage out further and ultimately reach the people that don't have connectivity.
Before we go into comments and discussions from this body, we do have an individual signed up to speak tonight. I would like to ask Lizone Grace to please join us in the podium.
Ready?
Ready for you.
Thank you.
Born ready.
Good evening, everyone from JEDO, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I sent to you an email with enough information. I didn't expect you to go through it and read it and have answers tonight, but I did want to bring some things to the attention, especially for those who are new. That the $250,000 that eventually part of that paid for the plan was for workforce internet broadband initiatives, not for infrastructure. Infrastructure development is a much larger scope that costs a lot more money. If you were to go back and look at the videos that night when the JEDO passed and approved that $250,000 for workforce internet broadband, it was not for a study. It was not for many of the things that, or some other positions. It was specifically for some specific projects. Scott Smathers actually gave the information about the range of how much those projects would be. And so now we have gotten to the point, I've watched over the period of time, how the conversation changed as people have come. And now we have taken what monies was dedicated to help a target population to where you can't do a piece of a project now. And so I'm using an example such as, it's not just a Topeka thing. Montero within itself is a neighborhood that I can't tell if they have a digital divide or anything, and very few other people, can as well. So I have been coming to this podium here for a pretty long time, driving up this digital inclusion conversation and driving monies and priorities for this year. So to watch where we have gotten this far here, where the money's gone for, a report, I'm trying to figure out how to salvage, and still bring some deliverables, because there are, the providers, they have billions of dollars, and they're going to do some things on themselves. And what you're talking about now in development, that's great. That's a lane over there. But where we started at was workforce internet broadband, which was a very small square, to bring services and abilities to targeted neighborhoods in the city. And I think that it's easy to find those cities because you have a city health map that's either pink or red, and you can probably look at there and say, what is it can we do? It may not be internet access, it may be programming, we don't know. So I have made some recommendations based off of what I have been working with practitioners in this space around the nation. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It makes, I think that as people come and go, as elected officials or as employees for a contractor, that you have to have some type of guidance or plans or some type of guidelines for people to follow. And I believe that beyond, this has nothing to do with infrastructure broadband. This has to do with the brass tacks of workforce internet broadband and the low-income individuals in our neighborhood. And so those were, I think there were 4 things that I mentioned. I do not know exactly how much money is available and left over from that. I think it was $30-some thousand. I made it clear on what I believe that should be used for, and there were links in the email that shows that other places, this is what they have done. I have made recommendations on the digital strategic equity plans. These are other things that cities and counties and even states have done. There are digital inclusion coalitions, having a body of people that's working, not just handpicked stakeholders, but people who are chosen by you because you are the ones who have to vote. I believe that that's a process that should be done to keep you in part of it. And then finally, that to have those, all of that can sunset, when the sales tax is over, because by then, progress should have been made that should be sustainable for itself. And so when it comes to, well, I would probably like to ask for 2 minutes.
Mayor, I move for additional 2 minutes.
We have a motion for an additional 2 minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Cook. At this point, instead of doing the roll call, all those in favor, raise your right hand. We had 5. Motion passes.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Graves, you have 2 additional minutes.
Those are the concrete things that I wanted to come and bring and put on the table for you to act upon. That a digital strategic plan, just like the agreement for JEDO, it has definitions, it puts some more meat on the table so that whoever is in position, they have some type of guidelines to automatically follow. I think that that's how we got sort of awry here. And to just hire a person or contract with an entity without you having some type of a policy in place or a playbook that has stakeholders saying, where are we going? How do we get there? And who can be a part of getting us there? I think that that's just giving sort of a blank check, and it's not really giving, good policy. The other digital inclusion fund, you just never know. I know companies, not even in Topeka, that can make contributions to that it has been going for numerous years in Kansas City, and if we can't get the funds to fund these type of programs in Ontario or in these neighborhoods, these are the places where historically cities are putting together to have funds so that nonprofits and groups that are doing digital inclusion and digital equity work, they have a place to come and get the funds. And so I think that for the long term, these are very important things that can be done, and it doesn't cost the JEDO anything extra. It just means that you have to do a little work in preparing some type of a document. There are probably good people who can glean through the information, the strategic equity plans and the things that I've said, who work for the city, the county, and whomever, that can come up with a draft that would be good enough for you all to say, we got it, we'll vote on it, this is our digital equity plan. And I'm going to speak about the Digital Equity Act, which this plan falls into at the end of it during public comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, at this point in time, we have heard the presentation from our community, and we've heard presentations from our presenters. Is there additional discussion? Commissioner Cook?
Mayor Daley, so thank you. If we could have the gentleman from Tilson, I've got some questions.
Sure.
In listening to your presentation, there was a reoccurring word that I heard, which is city, 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 city. And at the end, you said, and I think Councilmember Jensen, you said, by doing this, this will relieve the burden from the city so we have the money to invest into the county. Is the issue in the bureaucracy of the city, because with the county, we don't have franchise licensing. At the county, we don't have zoning regulations. At the county, we don't have barriers. And I am unaware of any roadblocks at all that the county has at planning or the commission for the expansion of broadband. And so the reoccurring thing that I was hearing is city regulation. So is that what am I hearing this correctly?
Not exactly.
What barriers do we have at the county?
Yeah, so I mean, let me say, it is typical in urban areas that there will be more requirements, right? So it is true, you are picking up on that. I think that there were a number of instances where there were, opportunities to streamline and different that were applicable to the city and not necessarily the county. I think probably the biggest and probably most important recommendation for the county is with regard to zoning and wireless facilities. So as we read the zoning requirements in the county, and our focus really was on wireless was on the county, because that's where we sort of expected wireless development to be really pivotal to filling those gaps. Is we saw an ordinance that was in place that was a perfectly reasonable ordinance for traditional tower development that you would have seen very commonly 10 years or more ago, right? What we didn't see was some clarity on, okay, what regulations were you going to apply to sort of the new generation of small wireless facilities that we think, it's not like the tall wireless facilities, especially in rural areas, are going away, but we do think that small wireless facilities are a really important tool to have a low-cost way to fill gaps in wireless coverage as well as add capacity in dense areas. So we really think that, in order to be more successful in attracting companies who would be willing to invest their own dollars in deploying wireless facilities in the rural parts of the county, it's important to take the steps that we outlined to clarify and to a certain extent improve the county's stance on wireless facilities, which happens to also be a joint stance, we think, with the city, and we think that collaboration was a good thing. So I think that there's, I think for meeting the goals that we've outlined, the wireless component will be more important for the county than the city, although the city can also get some benefit out of that as well.
Do you have any data or feedback from any provider that they have encountered any issues with Shawnee County when trying to expand into a broadband service?
So the feedback that we've gotten, let me give you two sources of feedback. So one is through the request for information process. I think it seemed very likely that there would be organically from providers out there some improvement in speed, some expansion in coverage, but that there would be a challenging business case for more ubiquitous deployment, right? Really filling in all of the gaps in the county. And, Tilson as a company does a lot of work permitting, designing, deploying wireless networks. We do other types of networks as well. So we do a lot of work for really a whole range of wireless companies, from rural wireless internet service providers who do fixed wireless, through utilities, through cellular companies. So we're really very familiar with the deployment methods, and we're really sort of deeply familiar with how small wireless facilities are being used in a variety of contexts. So again, I don't think that's going to be the exclusive tool. I think that wireless carriers may very well use existing structures, may use in some cases new towers. But really, when we've taken a look at this, we think that there's a real challenge in filling gaps in coverage that you sort of get from the existing available options, and that having the ability to place low-cost small wireless facilities is going to be an important piece of filling those gaps.
All right.
Commissioner Cook, and if I may, respectfully, I think that what I hear you say is that a lot of the challenges that you feel are being addressed were addressed as city challenges. And I think that the general colloquialism of describing the county is Topeka. And I know that that is not the spirit behind all of this, because if it would be a city of Topeka issue, Tilson right now would be presented to the city of Topeka and would not be presenting to JEDO.
But that was my question, Madam Mayor, with all due respect, was that this is a city issue. And I think that what the representative from Tilson indicated is outside of one possible zoning regulation, this is a city issue.
So could I also elaborate too? I mean, there are some other of the recommendations that I think are joint. For instance, our recommendation on the broadband coordinator role, we think actually that would be most powerful if that was somebody who was empowered to work across both the city and the county. We think that there's, to the extent that there is new development, even if it's focused on the city, there's the strong possibility that it has the opportunity to spill over into the county as well. And actually, I think one of your objectives really should be, how much expansion can you get in the county that does not actually be limited to be, a city initiative. So we think that having that, having the ability to have, if you're able to get a single person who can deal not only with multiple departments within one jurisdiction, but can actually help you navigate both jurisdictions, would be super valuable. I think, while there's certainly, I think, certainly the different types of franchising that you see and license agreements that you see in the city. Certainly, there have been fewer of those agreements in the county, and there's sort of a lower baseline. But I think, even where you're not so much enacting new policy, but sort of clarifying and making a clear statement about what your policy is would actually be very beneficial to the county as well as to the city.
Gina, yes, I wanted to
And if I may,
acknowledge
'cause
you.
there really is a larger issue here, and I have to tell you that while I'm very proud of the work that we've done as a county resident, I'm a little disappointed that we weren't able to come up with a way, we could present a plan to you that would show how we deploy throughout the county, where I live on 101st Street. But the reality is that after we showed you the models, where we were looking at significant investments, right? And there would need to be probably public dollars beyond the city limits because there was no business case that could be made for that type of deployment. We did pull back on that because you were very clear in your direction and what your expectation was. What we're hoping now that with these changes that we can not just go up to the city limits, but development will proceed into that 3-mile band beyond the city limits. And once we've got fiber there, there's going to be a much higher incentive for companies to come in and do the work we need to really deploy countywide.
If I could offer a quick example.
Absolutely, Councilman Jensen.
So if I want to deploy a wireless network in the county, I have to get the internet to the wireless tower, and that's often going to come from within the city limits where there is existing backbone to support that. So the ability to work with both the county and the city simultaneously is critically important to make that successful. Because I've got to get the internet from somewhere to a tower to put it up to broadcast out to other people. So the business case for a single point of contact to help get me access to all the resources within both governments that I need is then I don't have to schedule 2 sets of meetings, spend twice as much time. I can get it done and move on to the next tower.
Additional comments or questions from the body?
I have a
Commissioner
few.
Archer. Yes, Commissioner Archer.
Well, first of all, I'm concerned about this coordinator. I don't know who they're accountable to. I don't know who pays them. I don't know. It says empower them. I don't know what that means. It's not clear. But one thing I did want to bring up on page 16, it indicates JEDO's Broadband Business Assistance Initiative will facilitate private sector investment without making public expenditures to build, fund, or finance the resulting infrastructure. So there will be no public funding, is that correct, proposed?
Our recommendations in our report took as a sort of a baseline assumption that you did not want you didn't want that kind of investment. So these recommendations are structured around things that you can do without making those kinds of commitments.
Okay, well, my question would be, when you mention public funds, does that include money that we give to go to Topeka? Are you including that?
If I can offer,
Sure.
when we had initially talked about this, there was no appetite for public funds of any kind to be used for anything.
Exactly.
So we pulled back and retooled for what we could do, working with the private sector to maximize their available investment. So you're correct. At this point, we are recommending no public funds of any sort be deployed for any kind of incentive at all whatsoever.
So really, it's just a private sector program.
Right, and so the point of having the JEDO aspect here is we want to announce to the business sector that both governments are partnering to be open for business. That we want to work with the private sector to make it as easy as possible to come in and build the infrastructure we need to support these efforts.
I do have one more point, and to be honest with you, I'm pretty unimpressed. After 2 years and $200,000, we were going off the rails at one point, and Councilman Jensen had to save the project to come up with where we are. I'm just not very impressed. Essentially, what we're saying is have a coordinator and streamline some processes. And the thing about the coordinator that concerns me is recommendation 1, the city and council should appoint a broadband project coordinator to serve as the principal point of interface for companies wishing to develop broadband infrastructure. This coordinator should manage city and county resources. Should manage county and city resources. So we're delegating to that coordinator our resources to use and also coordinate with non-municipal organizations affecting broadband infrastructure development such as the state and electric utilities. That concerns me.
If I
That we
might,
have, yes.
Councilman Jensen.
perhaps a better word to use there would be access to. We're not, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is not to delegate authority of the city or the county. It's to provide a single point of contact who can facilitate access to those resources, communications with those resources. So again, as a developer, I would have to pick up the phone and make one phone call to somebody who knows who I need to talk to within both governments, who knows what to ask the GIS teams in both governments. So we're trying to make it easier and cheaper for them to do business with us.
So is this inaccurate or just ambiguous?
Well, these are just recommendations, sir, so these are not, we're not actually asking that people follow the letter.
Well, if we vote to approve it, it says that we are blessing these recommendations as they're stated.
Well, that's correct, they're just
Okay.
recommendations. So if the
But they-
individual governing bodies don't necessarily want to do it at that detail, then you're correct, it wouldn't necessarily be, we wouldn't need to do that. If we would like to amend it specifically to have that one word, I'm not opposed to that at all. But again, the idea is that these, especially once the legal teams get through the sample ordinances, they're not going to be implemented exactly as they're stated here.
If I may add a point of clarification, I think that the way that I envision this, and correct me, Gina, if I'm wrong, it's the same way that city and county work together with Topeka as one single entity that is the person that works with both sides of the body. They don't have the ability to make any regulations. They will still come back to this body that comprises both the city and the county. And then that individual will be a point contact that will work with all of us to ensure the continuation of this process.
And that makes sense. This doesn't.
So I think we wanted to be very careful about not dictating to either the JEDO board or the respective political subdivisions about how you would go about assigning staff resources to this. That was not our intent. We're not presenting you with a job description. We're not presenting you with this is how it should work. What we're saying is there needs to be a single point of contact. And Commissioner Archer, I understand what you're saying, but quite honestly, you tied our hands when we brought the 200-page report with the models and basically said, we're not investing public monies. And at that point, our vision for this project became much smaller. And we focused on things that we felt you would find acceptable, that there would be the political will to do, and that would move us forward incrementally.
But the initial report asked for tens of millions of dollars.
The initial report
7 million, 8
was a
million.
model. It was a model. But if you remember, on the county side, what we were proposing was a total network, not proposing, but suggesting that for less than a $10 million investment, and that funding could come from a variety of sources, we could cover the county outside the city limits. And that was part of the original modeling. But we didn't go there because we really felt we were instructed not to do that. But that information is still there. It can still be utilized. Lazone mentioned a digital plan. I'm a planner. I would be willing to work on something like that. I want to continue to be an advocate for broadband. And so if there is a will for either the city, the county, and or JEDO to actually develop a plan that you can test and bounce ideas off of so that you know it's something you want to do or not to do, I'm in.
Madam Mayor?
Councilman Jensen.
And I will be the first person to admit, I was one of the people that stood up and complained about the huge, massive number.
Yep.
Because you're absolutely correct, that for our community at this time is not really affordable. And I was one of the people that said, absolutely not, we're not doing this. And Gina stepped up and said, okay, whatever, shut up. Get on the committee and help steer the boat and make the change. And Tilson and Gina sat down with me, or I'm sorry, Chris, and Gina sat down with me for 2 hours the next day, and we talked about how we could take the information we'd used and how we move this project forward. And it's one of the greatest things I think that came out of that was the broadband summits. we said, okay, let's go to the private sector and ask them what we can do to be successful in here. And this is essentially what's come out of that, as we've looked through and tried to sort out how we move forward and how we get the community ready for private investment. Gina's absolutely right. We have a plan to deploy wireless in the county, or at least a rough sketch, something somebody could take and actually flesh out if they really wanted to. But it doesn't work without public funds, and right now there are no public funds available.
Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Cook?
But that gets back to my original comment that as it stands now, we have a market-based problem in the county, and that it is too expensive to expand broadband on the public sector in the county, and then you have a regulatory problem within the city. And so without addressing those two issues, addressing the regulatory issues within the city and the city planning, I mean, that's what really what, so we're hiring a planner to address the regulatory issues within the city.
Councilman Jensen?
So the planner also delivered a proposal to solve the communications issue in the county, but it's not affordable. Technology is simply not there yet. You know, our hope is that as technology cheapens over time and new technologies such as 5G emerge, it will become cheaper to offer that in the county. But, and please, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, currently, right now, given the amount of budget we have, there is not a technology that will make it cost-effective to deploy internet in the county without a significant public investment. There's just not a technology that will do it yet. That was part of what we went through in researching was how could we do it? What's out there? We met with, was it 2 or was it 3 wireless providers
We
to
met
talk
with
about how that
2,
might
yeah,
work?
2, yeah.
So I think we're saying the same thing. At this point in time, if there's anybody else that would like to weigh in, I want to make sure that everybody's voices are heard. Okay. Difficult conversation. It seems like there is an interest of further clarification on this plan.
Yes.
Before there is approval, and there's just concerns on how we would make this move forward. Is there a recommendation at this point in time that you would like to make, or
So,
you?
yeah, so our request is for a vote of commitment from the JEDO members to take these recommendations back to the respective governing bodies and implement them where possible and appropriate. Not according to the letter written here, but how they would best fit into each organization. We need those recommendations so we can complete the development guide, so we can bring that back to the body for review later this fall. We need to get that done as soon as we can so we can push that out to our incumbents and other folks who are interested in coming to the community and get this process started.
Commissioner Archer?
Thank you. So this coordinator is like an information clearinghouse? Who's it going to be? How are they going to be paid? I guess I don't understand exactly how that's going to operate.
So if I may interject here, Commissioner, I think that what's being requested right now, and I know that it's confusing because what we're being asked to do at this point in time is to proceed with the recommendations. But if I'm interpreting this correctly, and please help me, what I'm hearing is, at this point in time, the request from the group is for each of the governing bodies separately to take a look at these recommendations and appoint by each body. So the county would decide who the person is from their already existing staff, unless you guys feel that you need to bring in somebody else. And the same for the city of Topeka. An individual that will take a look at this document and earmark what are the areas that are pertaining to each of us, so that then we could then get back in touch with the group to say, these are the things that we feel that we could work on, and then take it from there. Is that what is being requested of this body tonight?
Yes, I mean, basically what we're asking you to do is pass the recommendations along for review, discussion, and we would hope approval. But we understand that that's strictly your purview.
If I could ask.
Yes, Councilman
Commissioner
Jensen.
Cook, would you like us to recommend somebody at the county or at the city or a third party and a budget to do so? I mean,
Why are you looking at me?
No, you're the county commissioner.
I know, but I'm not
Yeah,
Commissioner
chair.
Cook.
I'm sorry.
I think that may have been a compliment to Commissioner Archer.
So I think there was a disparagement to both of us, actually. These are the joys of having a 3-month-old. I apologize, Commissioner Archer.
Order, please, yes.
If those are recommendations you would like, I'm certainly happy to take them back to the team and try to sort out how that would fit in here. Our hope was at this point, though, was to have the respective bodies look at what they have to offer and how we might partner to do so without us taking sort of a top-down approach and recommending some specific person or a specific salary or job description, that sort of thing. And again, other comments, if you would, please.
So Commissioner Archer, would you be more comfortable if the motion is amended to state that each organization is going to assign a specific staff person to evaluate these recommendations to come back to the next meeting with a report?
Yeah, I think that would be.
Would you be amenable
For
to
the
that
record.
friendly amendment?
Yes, that would, well, I can't make a motion, but that would be
So
thrilled.
if somebody would make that motion.
I will make that motion.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Archer.
Thank
So
you.
we have a motion on the
Members
floor
make motions.
at this point that states that both organizations are going to assign an individual to take a look at all of the recommendations provided by Tilson this evening, and then come back in the next meeting with an action plan of the things that each organization feels that they can sign up for so that we can continue this process. Yes, Councilman Jensen.
So, and also, if those bodies, if there's something in the recommendations that they feel are a good fit, if those bodies could go ahead and make those changes, that would just speed the process up. Not saying they have to, but where it makes sense to go ahead and make some of the ordinance changes, that will only make the process go faster.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have a second for that motion? We have a second by Councilman Emerson. Additional discussion? We have a motion and we have a second. I would ask the clerk to do the roll call for the vote.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Commissioner Rippon?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cohen?
Yes.
Councilmember Emerson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yep.
7 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, for being here. Thank you to the individuals from Allo that took the time to come from Lincoln. And Lozone, thank you for your comments, as usual.
Thank you.
Gina, thank you for your excellent work. We now move on to item G, if the clerk would read.
G is approval of transfer of liquidated damage funds to Washburn Tech East project update.
Okay, I'm filling in for Barbara this evening. She usually takes the lead on Washburn Tech and Washburn Tech East. For those of you that were at the December meeting, this is what we expected to happen in the process. The action before you tonight is simply to approve to transfer $50,043 of the $58,750 that was received related to delays with the Washburn Tech East construction project. So we're requesting to transfer those funds to Washburn to offset the costs of them having to provide classes at an alternate location, and they have provided detail that is in your packet as well. So I'd stand for any questions, and County Councilor Jim Crowell is here as well.
Any questions for Molly or for Councilman Crowell?
I've spoken to the county councilor today, and I'll move to approve.
We have a motion for approval by Commissioner Archer, a second by Commissioner Cook. Additional discussion? Councilman Emerson.
Not a question, but I just wanted to thank the county councilor. This has been a very arduous process, and I would, I do not envy the work he's had to do, but it's been excellent work, and thank you, Mr. Crowell.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Councilman Lesser.
What's the rent amount? I assume that Washburn Tech paid rent at the new building as well, correct?
At the new building, so they have partnership funds that are part of the project, and so we're, if I remember right, we're offsetting their partnership funds for the first few years, and then that will kick in afterward.
Additional comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we proceed by voting with the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Commissioner Rippon?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cohen?
Yes.
Councilmember Emerson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yes.
7 yes.
7 having voted yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item 4, presentations. If the clerk would read.
4 is Go Topeka's first quarter report.
Okay, so the team is here, and we promise to be brief with our updates, as you all have a lot of information about quarter one's activities in your packet. And I know, in the past, it may have been common for you to see Go Topeka staff 4 times a year at these meetings, but I think we're probably at 4 times a month now, so.
It probably shouldn't be much.
I'll hit some highlights, and then we'll stand for questions. Starting off with new business attraction, so I mentioned before, but we have a new staff member, Rhiannon Friedman, with us, and so she's in the audience with us tonight, just watching, but in the future you will see updates from her, and she has gotten the chance to work a handful of live projects. We've gotten 6 new projects year to date. 4 of those have been through direct face-to-face interactions with myself and site selectors or companies where we've had kind of a matchmaking session. If they're looking at geographic areas that align with where we are and other criteria, then we're able to meet with them and talk with them about the assets that may work for their company. So a total of 32 total projects in the pipeline for new business attraction. Looking ahead, we are still in review of our incentive guidelines and have been diving into that with our implementation work group within Momentum 2022 and also talking about that at the board level. We've had 2 board retreats this quarter to dive into more of the strategic plan that is centered around Go Topeka specifically and develop a strategic plan that is specific to economic development outside of Momentum 2022 and really drive into hopefully deliver some metrics and some more specifics toward those goals at the end of the year. And then crossover with the innovation focus. You'll hear from Katrin and one of her board members later in the presentation. And there's an obvious connection there when we're looking at attracting new companies. A lot of them are the companies that Katrin is working to attract as well. I'm also playing Barbara for this part. So Business Retention 101. We have held a meeting with staff at the Greater Topeka Partnership, not just Go Topeka, but all of the staff in the Greater Topeka Partnership that interface with companies that are existing companies in Topeka and Shawnee County to expand our team. So you can see in different areas around the country, different ways of doing business retention and expansion work and gathering data and finding red flags and finding opportunities for growth. We're expanding our team to involve other folks that actually meet with companies on a regular basis to help out with those efforts. As you've seen tonight and you'll see in later meetings, we're working heavily on projects and the contracts around those projects as well. Obviously, doing business retention visits is part of our daily duties. HR and recruitment. So we talked a little bit about this at one of the previous meetings. There is a need from a lot of our corporate partners for us to help them provide some resources to recruit staff to the community. They're not having a problem recruiting to their company, but they're having a problem recruiting people to live in Topeka and Shawnee County. So we're working on some tools for all corporate partners in Topeka and Shawnee County to utilize. And you'll hear more about TPM Academy noted there when Barbara is back. That's the Talent Pipeline Management Academy. She was selected to be involved in a cohort of peers that are working on talent pipeline management. Quality of place process. Each project is at a different stage. All are moving forward as planned with the exception of some weather delays, obviously, with our rain here recently. Since most of them are construction-based, there's been a little bit of delay in some of their timing. Project bids and budgets are being reviewed and coming in smoothly and at a steady pace. Auburn is ahead of all the other projects just because theirs is more straightforward. They've received most of their funding for their project and are waiting for the weather to cooperate for concrete and some of the construction that needs to be done there. Also covering for Barbara on workforce development. Some numbers in your packet and before you on the SOTO and NETO programs. Just note that NETO is right in line with SOTO's Q1 numbers, and total trips since the beginning of the program are over 12,000. This slide is a snapshot that is also in your packet. It's a lot of data around workforce and labor, and it's some data points that we monitor and wanted to share with you all because we believe they're important for our community to monitor and work toward improving. Most of these numbers have improved as they're tracked year on year, so that's a good story there. Promised I'd be brief, so we'll all stand for questions unless you have something specific and burning right now. Go for it.
Molly, I know you're going to hate this, but is it accurate that you just got selected to be 40 under 40?
Well, not just, but yeah, in January, and it just happens to be Economic Development Week this week, so I know our staff was scraping the bottom of the barrel for some content and put that on social media, but thank you. Yes.
Congratulations, you're a great asset to our community.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So, first of all, it's also Small Business Week. So let's, everybody just commit to celebrating small businesses by visiting a business in your neighborhood, doing business with your dry cleaners or your restaurant or whatever's closer to you. So let's celebrate small business. Keep that in mind. And then also, May the 14th, we'll be having our small business luncheon where we recognize 7 small businesses from across the community and the good that they've done for our community as well. You all, again, have seen this report presented. This is our incentive report. I want you to take note of the $1.3 million economic impact that we have by this program. This program has done so much good in the community for small businesses, and so just call your attention to it. And what we will be doing this year is looking at how we can enhance this program, because if it can create a job, if it can allow a business to expand, we would want that. And so we're going to talk about how we can do it better. Oh, wrong way, sorry. And then real quickly, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Fast Track. We're working with the program called the HIP program. It's the Hospitality Incubator Program. We have about 15 of those individuals in our, what we call our Fast Track program. And these individuals, they are working on what they call a culinary expert program. Once they complete that program, they'll be on the market to be able to either open their own business or work for a restaurant or an entity that provides food services. And so just wanted to let you know how we were working with them. So we're providing the business side, and the HIP program is providing the kitchen culinary side. And so we hopefully together will build what we need in the community as we begin to open more restaurants and more hospitality programs. This will be an asset to our community. Also wanted to share with you that we are currently working on the TSC3 program, looking at surveying individuals. We did one survey, we'll send it back out again to determine how it has impacted their business. So we'll be working on that. The Housing Authority, I heard somebody else saying that they were collaborating with the Housing Authority. We are too. We wanted to take a look at individuals within the complexes that wanted to start a business. You know, what is it that they need? And so we'll be working with them. We did our first listening session and survey about 3 weeks ago, and then we'll continue to do this because we realize that there's a gem in every community, everywhere you go, and so we don't want to leave any stone unturned. If there's an opportunity for us to start businesses in this housing complex and work through our empowerment center idea, we're going to do it. And so we'll be working with them and providing you with reports this fall. PTAC has been very active. Yesterday they hosted about 150 registrants in a industry day with Fort Riley here at the Capitol Plaza. So they have really done an outstanding job in creating that relationship. There were probably about 20 government agencies in town, and those individuals are the ones that we want to look at in the future to come back to our community to look at our businesses and do those. So what PTAC does is she aligns those businesses with the agencies, and she's done an outstanding job. So what you see here is for every dollar that JEDO invests in the community, $6.24 comes back. So she generates $6.24 for every $1 that JEDO invests. So we're really excited about that, and we want to give her accolades and tell her how much we appreciate her. Now, the other things that we're working on would be we're working on East Topeka. We're taking a deep dive and kind of looking at East Topeka as sort of a new probably business district. So we're looking at is how can we find where the gaps are in East Topeka. How can we look at what best fits in East Topeka? And then what are our future plans? So East Topeka Council is working on something like that, just taking a deep look at what businesses could thrive in this community. And so we are tearing apart, you know, all of the myths that we've had about East Topeka, and we're bringing that business on, that community online as well. We are also working on 2 grants for East Topeka. It's the beautification grant that we're looking at now. We're looking at beautifying the entire California Avenue. So what we will do, we're working with an artist who is going to do sort of a, what we call the pole flags, phase 1 poles flags. She'll be working with an elementary school to, on the back side of the flag, create some haikus that are positive in nature. And then we're looking at how we can go from the ground up. So we'll be doing beautification on the street. We'll look at benches, where could they go? And so when you ride down California Avenue, it'll be a totally different thing. So that's our goal. We're also looking at a program, a grant program that will provide food insecurity fund. And so that's through AARP. They wanted to look at how we could do some connectedness and bring together individuals that have food insecurity, and we're going to keep it a secret until we find out whether we got the grant. We don't want to say what we're going to do because we haven't got the grant yet. So we've looked at a number of different ways that we could collaborate with individuals in the community. We identified about 15 to 20 partners, and so we'll be moving forward on that. And that's about it. Now for questions.
Councilman Emerson.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that. California Avenue.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
tell me what the blocks of that are?
No, I cannot tell you what the blocks are at this moment because what we're going to do is see where it best fits. But we are coming off of the interstate onto California. I just don't know how far down we plan to go. The grant is small, so it'll be a beginning grant. So I can't say until I determine how much money we have to spend on it.
That's just 21st to 29th.
Okay. Okay.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Glenda, will you email me tomorrow? I'd like to speak with you, and we're not going to listen to Antonio way out
Okay.
there, okay? We're not going to do that. And if you have any problems, see me, I can handle him.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Glenda.
There you go.
Good evening. My name is John Ketty, and I appreciate you giving me a few minutes this evening to update you on some work that we're doing on the innovation and entrepreneurship team. As an IT leader at Security Benefit, innovation is very important to my business. It is a citizen of Topeka. It is critical to our economic development. And finally, as the father of 2 small sons, living in an innovative community is very, very important to me on a personal level. So I'm just going to make a few comments this evening about some of the efforts and work that we've been doing at Go Topeka on this front. But I do want to share my passion with you on the topic of innovation. I believe that innovation is not something that we should conceptualize, that we have to keep talent here in Topeka. I believe innovation has to be, we need to attract talent to Topeka from the state, from the region, and ultimately all over the world. So you may say to yourselves, well, what are some things that we as a community need to do? Due to time, I'm just going to list 3 things tonight and then turn over to my colleague, Katrin. Number 1 is there has to be some sort of space where innovators can come and work. Last week, Katrin and I were at Kansas State. And we were talking to a professor who's going to have a company visit him later in May, and absolutely said Topeka would be of consideration if we had this space for this company that's going to be visiting with him. Now, a minute ago, I said that we have to aspire to be in a community that attracts people from the state, the region, and the world. The professor is having a visit from a company from China. So when I talk about these things, these are not aspirational or delusional things off in the future. There are opportunities for us today to develop, again, if we have the right facilities and the right environment. Number 2, To have a more innovative community, there has to be the right relationships with universities, corporations, and government entities. We're very optimistic about that here in Topeka because we're large enough that we have some scale and size, but we're small enough that we can connect the dots very quickly. Number 3, we need to realize that we're competing with communities all over the United States. There's nothing that I've shared with you here tonight that other communities all through the United States aren't actively working on. So we believe there also has to be something unique, again, attracting people into this area. Over the last several months, representatives from Go Topeka have been working with the most successful technology accelerator in the world in Silicon Valley. I want to repeat that. We've been working with the most successful technology accelerator in the world, and they are open to doing programming with us here in Topeka. Now, it's going to take some work, it's going to take community engagement and involvement, but we have the opportunity to do some truly exciting things here. Again, thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Katrin.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you for letting us present our recent work with you today. John Keddy is a key member of our Innovation Advisory Board, and he is correct. We have focused a lot of our efforts on, in the last few months and weeks, developing a detailed plan of our innovation campus concept. A little bit of information is on the slide here. We envision this to be a place and center for innovation for the community with educational components and with links to the school district and regional universities, including Washburn University. It will be important to find the right mix of tenants for this campus. Strong anchor tenants, along with growth-oriented innovative companies and startups in the bioscience and animal health sector. And as we're thinking 5, 10, 15 years ahead, we need to plan for room for expansion also, because if we are successful, and all indicators are that we should, we need to have room to grow also. As you can see, the vision is becoming a more and more specific and I'm excited about the level of interest that I get in my conversations with the board, with different stakeholders in the community. As we're building the future, As we're building the future, we also provide real-time support to the existing community of entrepreneurs and innovators. To that end, we have formed 5 new subcommittees in our entrepreneurship work group under the Momentum 2022 initiative. And these subcommittees are community building, communication, mentorship, smart city, and events. They meet now on a monthly basis and report their progress in quarterly meetings, town hall meetings. The next one is going to be on June 6th, and anybody who is interested in joining us can join us at 2 p.m. that day. Thank you very much. Stand for any questions.
Yes, Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it Mr. Keddy? Is it? Mr. Keddy, you mentioned something about someone was visiting K-State, a Chinese company, and I've heard similar things recently. I guess I'll just say my frustration has been our lack of urgency, I guess, in getting this addressed. My sense is once these companies are located in, say, Manhattan around the MBATH facility, once they're built, they're not going to be looking to move to Topeka at that point. So we have I think about a year and a half horizon to get them landed here. Are we doing any concrete steps right now? I mean, acquiring land, getting things ready. I mean, it's going to be too late in 3 or 4 years if we get this done. Can you tell me if there's any steps being taken? And I know you don't want to say where because of negotiations. But
my colleague Katrine's far more qualified than I am. I want to make a quick comment on your comment, if I may. I couldn't agree more. And the professor was sharing. No, we got in touch with a professor from somewhere here in Topeka. Said you guys should go connect with this person. We're just getting to know each other, general networking. Say, hey, I got visitors coming in 2 weeks. He said, I would have no hesitation with recommending they check out Topeka. I think at the moment, Manhattan is kind of full. So you're exactly right, there is an opportunity, but we can't assume Manhattan's just staying there. Of course, they're expanding and growing. And then I'll let Katrina comment on your more direct question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We feel that sense of urgency a lot. We have been working diligently on starting a proposal that we can present to JEDO at some point later this year. And it's going to encompass facilities. It is going to encompass programming. So it's going to be a package that makes sense for the community. I had presented previously our vision of having a downtown innovation center that has co-working office space and an incubator type environment. That would be the next level for a 712 innovations type company, organization. And the innovation campus would, there's an urgent need for lab space in the region. We hear that over and over again. And the reason the Chinese company wants to talk to us is that there's no ready to move in lab space in Manhattan either. And we had this conversation in Lawrence as well. We had these conversations in Kansas City. There's a great opportunity to build that lab space within the Innovation Center, and we're moving as quickly as we can. I agree with you. The window is open right now.
Absolutely.
And not to press you, but I hate to wait till September, I guess, to revisit this again. I mean, is there a time when you feel comfortable? Can we say in June you'll be back here, or July you'll be back here with a plan? Listen, I'm a contractor, and from day one I sign these contracts, and I sweat till I'm done, you know? And that's, honestly, that's a sense of urgency. I'd like to see everybody like worrying until, and I see Mr. Paparnik gonna bail you out here. I'm not trying to press you, but
This is good, because this is new, this is innovative, it's not the way we've done economic development before. We have some of the brightest people in the community sitting on this board and working on this, and they are talking about we cannot afford, we have to leapfrog. You use the term leapfrog all the time. And this is good that you're bringing this up, because we feel this sense of urgency, and we know we have to move fast. Right now, they're trying to just ascertain what are our costs, how much is this going to cost, and how we're going to pay for it. But we have to move so fast. And they're ready to move fast. We've just been, Topeka's been cautioning them a little bit. We have to get Topeka comfortable with this, and we have to get JEDO comfortable with it, because we've been in the business of owning the parks that we've had and bringing in different types of businesses. This is a whole new type of economic development that's going to be huge for us, and we need to move at lightning speed. So your comments tonight are confirmation, I think, for her board that you share that sense of urgency too. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you. And just lastly, is there anything you need from us? I mean, is there any?
Right now, what Topeka has asked this board to do is really just bring a pro forma to Topeka, so that we really understand what we're talking about from a cost standpoint. And I think that they're literally weeks away from that.
Fantastic. I can't speak for everyone here, but I would love to have a special meeting as soon as it can be done.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great comments. Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Honor. So I also share the same concern. I also know at what speed government moves, and I'm worried that this isn't realistic. I mean, these facilities cost millions, sometimes hundreds of millions. We have $5 million a year. So, and I don't want to dissuade you guys from moving forward, but I'm a realist, and I don't, unless there's massive amounts of private funding out there that I'm not aware of, are we looking down a rabbit hole that we can't get down in time before the window closes?
I think the growth opportunities are there for years to come. We need to move as quickly as we can, but we can't afford to give up now. I'm going to continue these conversations with the Chinese company. They're not probably going to move this year. They have long-term planning to do themselves, and if I can get their requirements and use these requirements in putting the building concept together, then we have our first client potentially. We're in conversations with potential anchor clients. So if we can fill that building before it's even, have some commitment before it's even started, I think then we can make a true business case that this is something that would work for Topeka and Shawnee County.
And I couldn't agree more. I thought we had an 18-month window here. I mean, isn't the whole point to do all this before the facility in Manhattan goes online? Or do we have a long term?
If I may, Commissioner Jensen, that was my, I don't know the exact timeline of that facility. I think that's about right, but I don't know that for certain. I think I was the one who interjected that.
Well, I'm all for moving this forward. I think it's a great idea, and it's something our community can be very proud of. From a government perspective, though, we ain't got no money, other than, what we've already approved, and I mean, that would take years to put together the amount of money needed for that. So go private sector.
Okay.
Go public-private partnerships.
Could not agree more. It's just going to have to be something other than our checkbook, I'm afraid.
All right, next person, I think.
All right, so it's been quite a busy time for Forge. We had 19 events in Q1. We've had 9 in Q2 so far for a total of 28 events year to date. So keeping very busy there. We had 68 attendees at our new member welcome, which for the first quarter, which was really exciting for us. We already have some of those members that are now on the committees and herds, as we call them. We had our day of service, which generated 92 unique attendees. All of last year we had 222, so that was really a big win for us. We had over half of those attend the after social, which we had 7 last year. So we're making leaps and bounds over attendance. We've had 726 attendees so far at all of our events, of our 28 events, roughly having around 20 to 40 at each event, which again is leaps and bounds from where we were last year at this point in time. Next, we've also had some new happenings with Forge. We've, of course, had the partnership with the Topeka Youth Commission. They have hit the ground running. They hosted a panel at the Go Topeka Board Retreat, answered questions on best communication between the youth and the adult partnerships, quality of life. They presented at the State of the Community, which they were really excited about and got a lot of positive feedback and media attention from. And so now they are working on their strategic goals, forming the subcommittees, and getting those weekly, monthly meetings happening, and then also hitting the ground fundraising. They got their first check this week, so they were really excited for that. We also have the partnership with the internship that Washburn had with us. Washburn and Forge worked together to do a downtown, bridging the gap between Washburn students and downtown Topeka, and figuring out really why they don't come downtown, what they think about downtown, what they want from downtown, and we've presented at the boards for those. And next, we've got some action items, and also to make sure that it's not just a one-off, one internship, really making it a strategic partnership long-term. And then the thing I'm probably most proud of, we have a new flag. So we got nearly 4,000 votes, which for a community our size is fantastic. The winning flag received over 71% of the votes. So really, there was no doubt that this was the flag that the community wanted. And again, just wanted to reiterate all that we can. It is not just a flag. We are in community partnerships right now, working with different local entities to try and get it on their merch, to try and get on their products, and trying to get the community surrounding it. I'll stand for any questions.
Where can we get a flag?
TopekaFlag.com. You can order them. We've got them all. We're doing all the in-house shipping right now. But TopekaFlag.com, there's a side tab that says order merch, and the shirt, the cup, the flag, all that's right there.
TopekaFlag.com.
TopekaFlag.com.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Next person? We're done. All right. Is that a sign of joy, Commissioner Archer? We now proceed to the public comment section of the evening. The first person signed up to speak is Dave Miller.
Together Topeka's doing great things for Cradle
It's okay.
Oh, Diane, do you have a report?
I do, actually.
Oh, yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor De La Isla. I will not bore you with the details that are part of your written report. You have bulleted items summarizing our Q1 activity. I do want you to know on the slide you'll see a chart that displays a reorganization. The intent of sharing this with you tonight is simply so that you know our plans moving forward. We're in the process of restructuring simply to allow concentration and focus to each of the 5 different areas that need it so that we can so that we can help accelerate our progress in each of these areas and give them the time and attention they deserve to move forward with our plans. This plan will go into action July 1, and together Topeka will be operating more on an academic year model fiscally with the GTP January through December, but in terms of our goals and activities, we'll be operating more in line with an academic year. Any questions?
Thank you for being so gracious with us.
Sure, thank you.
All right, now we move on to the public comment. The first person signed up for public comment is Dave Miller. Dave Miller? Mr. Miller does not seem to be available. The next person signed up is James Dobish. Oh, Dobie? Oh. Mr. Dobish? Okay. The next person signed up to speak is Kurt Kuda.
Good evening. I'm going to be real quick. I think there's a storm coming, so let's get everybody out of here. A couple things. I wanted to first direct a couple comments at the board here. I want to thank you for your flexibility on a couple of the projects that we talked about earlier to start the meeting with, your willingness to meet on special meetings and to give those projects your full support. On the Mars deal, it's not only exciting to see them expand, but I really enjoyed Brett's report on the economic impact that company has had on Topeka and their investment back into it. That is a great story. I just sat there and just I wish we could replicate that over and over. And I certainly hope that the win in waiting in Project Purple will someday be able to come forward and we'll be able to have the same type of economic impact and community impact results there. As Molly indicated earlier, I didn't expect her to bring that out, but this is Economic Development Week. And as this year's chair for Go Topeka, I wanted to just recognize and thank our staff that we have for Go Topeka. They're a great bunch of people. They're committed, talented. And this year there's a lot of things going on, not only the traditional things on business attraction and expansion that we talked about, but small business programs, workforce development, young talent development, all that stuff is just great. But the strategic planning sessions we've been in have been very engaged, energizing, and some of the things coming out of them, including the innovation concept, there's a lot of great things on the come. And so I do appreciate some of the members here having the sense of urgency we do, as well as the optimism on getting things done and moving this community forward. So that will conclude my remarks. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Next person signed up to speak is Dan Foltz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just real briefly, just to follow up on the innovation note, as I'm chair-elect of Go Topeka, I want to reach out and make a strong invitation to all of you, because we do have an opportunity and we do want to move respectfully fast, is that there's a lot of information here that our advisory board has really been passionate about. And to have the leaders of innovation in our community passionate about this is an opportunity. So call us out. We'll call you out. I know you spend a lot of time donating to the community, but this is a slice of time that we really need to retool how we think, because adjusting to the future is very important about how we think about economic development, and it's just that important. So that's my plea to you, open invitation to encourage that communication and that collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foltz. Next person signed up to speak is Carol Marple.
Thank you very much, but I think I'll decline.
Next person signed up to speak is Lizone Graves. Last person signed up to speak, actually, is Lizone Graves.
I don't know what to say about that one, but thank you again for your time. I just want to bring up some information about the Digital Equity Act. It is something that was submitted in the Congress by a senator, and it's to garner over $1 billion over 5 years to send to states and municipalities to address digital inclusion projects. There are some things that, and I've shared this with a few people, there you have a website, digitalequityact.org, that if cities or states want to access these funds, that there are some things that they will have to have in place. And that's why I mentioned that digital strategic equity plan earlier. Now, I would assume that the city, the county, has some lobbyist or some political person or some staff who can look into this. If you need a person to call and answer the questions to the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, I can get that number, who can really explain why is this important, what is at stake, what is available, because it would probably, if it is passed and approved in Washington, D.C. within the next couple of years, then all states and cities will be in competition with these funds here. I'm bringing this because a lot of what we're talking about is exactly about this here. And the reason that I went to Charlotte with the national conference, and that's how I found out about the information. The reason I bring it back here is because Topeka's where I live. I have a stake here, you know, so why should I share the information with elected officials in Utah when I should be sharing it with elected officials in Topeka? Because digital inclusion in the areas that we're talking about how we're going to fund these broadband initiatives. Within a couple of years, you may have access to $1 billion in a grant writer who can maybe say, we got these things already going in our city and county, innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, and I've just wanted to bring this forth so the powers that be can do whatever that they can after they find out this information about it, to better position us to at least compete, you know, for the funds, so that we don't just have to rely on $5 million in sales tax funds and a few contributions from some companies. There are not just the few people here, but there's probably people, you know, watching this who are concerned and interested in this. So this is sort of, I'm not sure if anybody here has heard about the Digital Equity Act, that it is something that is going to be decided one way or another. And so I just want to encourage our city and our county, JEDO, you know, to be prepared, to look into it, to do what's necessary so that we're in position to at least apply for the funds. And when we're looking at, you know, projects in our lower income neighborhoods, maybe some of them won't come to fruition for 3 or 4 years. But within 2 or 3 years, there's going to be some other resources to the table. And there are other resources available nationwide that I went and tried to bring information back as far as ease of access to hotspots and refurbished computers and things of that nature there, specifically targeting the Monteras and the High Crest and the low-income neighborhoods. These are things that I'm just doing anyway. So I just want to, one, to put this Digital Equity Act on the front burner, to ask you to have your staff and people to look into it, and encourage you to do what you can do to position yourselves to take advantage of this opportunity.
Thank you for that, Lizone. At this point in time, the next thing on the agenda is a reminder of the upcoming meetings. We have meetings scheduled for September 11th, 2019, and the next meeting scheduled for December 11th, 2019, unless we do have any meetings that happen in between because of a pressing sense of urgency and excitement for our innovation group. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I'd just like to invite everybody to Taco El Sol. It's a small mom and pop shop. Tomorrow from 6 to 7:30, it's coffee with Chief Cochran. It's going to be safe over there in East Topeka because we're going to have all the police officers over there. And I live over there, so it's going to be. But you know, Glenda, you talk about small businesses. I hope to see you there. I hope to see you there. I hope to see you there to come through and let them know that we care about them. We don't do that enough. We don't do that enough. I don't drink coffee, but I will have a taco. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to the partners here from the county, because we are one team. And we are working together to ensure that our communities, period, all of our communities, are thriving. So I really do appreciate this partnership. This meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening.
I got the taco.